Bandwidth for JS Party is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. So we're here with Alex Sexton. This is part of the kickoff shows for JS Party. We're excited about the show because a lot of planning, a lot of fun's going into this. But, Alex, when Michael mentioned you as one of the potential hosts and then you agreed to participate, Jared and I, we were pretty excited, Jared. What did you think, Jared? We were pretty excited?
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling, I can't remember who I was telling, but I was saying to somebody that the name JS Party was partially inspired by a show that you used to do, Alex, which was jQuery, which was a fun show that I enjoyed briefly. And so absolutely excited to have you on the show that we're doing. So thanks so much for hosting with us, and welcome to JS Party.
Glad to be on.
So the point of these kind of pre-shows is to get to know our three co-host panelists a little bit. And so in that light, why don't you give the audience a little bit of your backstory, where you're coming from, and how you got to be a co-host on JS Party?
Sure. So I was born in, say, March of 1986. My mom, okay, probably not that far back.
I like the fact that you're born in March. I mean, we're kindred spirits then.
Yeah. I was lying about that.
Oh, you were lying?
Oh.
It wasn't March?
No, okay, it's March.
Okay, it's March.
I don't know. I don't even know who to believe at this point.
That's I don't want it stealing my identity. No, let's see. Why? I know Michael from JSConf and NodeConf, so we go kind of far back. We were both kind of staff with Chris back in the day, pretty early JSConf stuff. Maybe not the first one or two.
Chris Williams,
okay. At JSConf, and then I spun off and did TXJS with Rebecca Murphy, and then Michael has done NodeConf. And so we've all kind of staffed each other's conferences and things like that.
I was at the first TXJS. I didn't know you were a part of that.
Oh, yeah. That was the Rebecca and I, as part of kind of jQuery, doing a conference. We had done North Carolina JS the first time. And then I've run every TXJS since then myself. But I haven't had one in 2 years, so that's whatever.
Is it going back?
Yeah, it'll come back. I just had like babies and lived in San Francisco for a summer and those kinds of things. So it can be tough. But anyways, that's how I know Michael. And I used to do jQuery with Paul Irish, Adam Sontag, and Rebecca Murphy back in the days when jQuery was a little more popular. Not that podcast was much about jQuery at all, but it was kind of a good basis for discussion back in the day for general front end fun stuff. I don't know. I've been doing JavaScript. I think I figured out for like 12 years now, which is kind of crazy. It's a long time to be doing anything. So JavaScript is definitely what I've spent the bulk of my career working on. And I worked at a few consultancies, and then I worked at a place called Bizarre Voice, which was kind of a big job I had, and now I work at Stripe. So that's I guess the most interesting parts of my working history.
You've been there Stripe for a while now, right?
Yeah. I've been at Stripe for almost 4 years now, which is a long time since.
It's strange I know that because I don't really know you. So I'm kind of wondering why I know that.
No, that's creepy. That's fine. Stripe has been a pretty cool company to be a part of. I work remotely from Austin, Texas, and Stripe has grown quite a bit. And since I don't work in the office, every time I go back, I don't recognize anyone because it's growing so fast. But I know their Slack handles and such, so it usually works out.
It works out, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what you guys want me to know. I can talk for a long time. So if you have specific questions about my past, I think maybe that would be more courteous to the audience members who have to listen to me speak.
Well, let's just give a little bit of your JavaScript background. So like you said, you were involved with jQuery. You're on the board of directors. You also have a lot of work put into Modernizr. So thank you for that. Maybe give your open source background, some of the stuff that you're involved in, kind of like your angle into JavaScript.
So I went to, I think it was jQuery Conf. It was the first jQuery Conf because the ones before were jQuery Camp. But I guess if you scroll even further back, I joined the jQuery IRC channel on Freenode way back in the day. I don't remember how long ago. And that's where I met Paul Irish and Rebecca Murphy and Adam Sontag, which eventually turned into jQuery. But we all decided to go to that conference together. And that's where I met John Resig and all the different jQuery folks back then, and kind of got involved in jQuery. I'm trying to remember when that would have been, like 2008, 2009, something like that. And then we did some small commits. I wasn't on the team, but I contributed for a long time. It was a goal of mine, I think, some year, like my New Year's resolution, to contribute to a major open source project, and jQuery kind of was that. And then eventually I joined the teams, and then eventually became an advisor for the jQuery Foundation. Once they became a foundation, that's its own whole story. And then eventually became a full-on member of the board until that board kind of dissolved whenever it joined the Linux Foundation very recently. So that's kind of the whole arc in that I'm no longer a member of the board of that of the jQuery Foundation because of the new kind of setup, which I fully support. So I don't have a ton of code in jQuery, but that was certainly where I came up came up in the open source world along with a lot of those people. Modernizr was also written by someone in the jQuery IRC channel originally, which it was, well, not really, I guess. Farouk Atesh wrote it, and Paul and Ben Allman, who has a couple plugins in the jQuery world, they decided that Modernizr needed to be rewritten to be better, and so they kind of rewrote it entirely, almost entirely, to be better. And I joined shortly after that. Ben didn't necessarily stick around on the team, but Paul and I were pretty good friends at that point. I think we're at JSConf EU, and we were talking about how people load too much into their browsers. We were, way ahead of our time. I think it's still the argument on Twitter. So we decided to try to use feature detection in order to not load all the different stuff. And that's kind of where YepNope came out of, which was a library I wrote kind of as an external library to Modernizr, but really just it paired very well with Modernizr. The goal of YepNope was you only load the code that the browser can even run or use, rather than every possible version of your code. I've since killed that project because there are new, better techniques, like use an HTTP2 server and use the build tools that exist today to load bundles and do things. But there are better tools, so I don't think in order asynchronous loading of dependencies is always the fastest thing anymore. Mm-hmm. And then other open source stuff, probably my other most popular projects. There's one that's this CSS color checker that got a lot of press in like the tweets and things, but it actually doesn't do anything. I don't think anyone uses it. But it's a very popular project that everyone starred one time and then never used. But I won't talk about that too much. A very big flash in the pan. The goal of it was kind of cool. I mean, I think we use it at Stripe. It was kind of like a warning at Stripe, to where, like, it came out of an idea from an old Nicole Sullivan talk from, I think, the original TXJS, where she was like, I consulted with Facebook to try to help them with their 8 megabyte CSS file, and we went through and we found 82 different values for what Facebook Blue was, because everyone would just eyedropper the middle of the F in order to try to get the color, and then paste it in, and that was how things worked back in the day. There weren't variables or anything like that, and so they moved over to a system to where it was harder to make those types of mistakes. But I still found that whenever you had the giant variables file, people would get Facebook Blue right because that one's easy. They would get pretty much every other color wrong anyways, because how do you know something's called deep background --2 -light x light, or whatever crazy variable ends up as trying to be a generic name for background of this specific modal or whatever.
How about grayer?
More gray. Grayest. And so I realized I said I won't talk about this plugin. Now I'm going very deep into it.
You are. I like it.
It's kind of a fun thing. So this thing just pulls out every color and it finds colors that are different or are different than each other in value, but that a human could not perceive the difference of within some range. And so there's an algorithm for this, the CIED E2000 algorithm. It's used in like compression. That way they can, use less colors and then be able to compress better. And so like the human can detect differences in blues differently than they can in reds and yellows. And so it's somewhat complex algorithm, but someone actually already wrote that algorithm and put it in NPM. So I did not port that to JavaScript. I just used it in a post CSS plugin that finds things that are like within a threshold and then says, hey, these should probably just be the same color. And that's the whole thing. The actual value that I think I've added since jQuery Modernizr days is in internationalization tooling, which I got pretty deep into at the end of my time at Bazaar Voice and do a bunch of work on at Stripe as well. Message format JS is something, if you've ever used getText or try to do pluralization or interpolation of variables into messages or text in your website, then message format's a very good solution. It's a standard, but it didn't really exist in JavaScript outside of a few Google things that were very googly that you couldn't get it out of. So I wrote a parser for that as well as an implementation. There's another competing library, React Intel, that we actually use at Stripe, and it uses like my parser underlying kind of. It's kind of been changed a little bit since then. But so a lot of the internationalization tooling that people are using today actually kind of came out of some stuff that I did. And I think it's a very good solution. I would advocate for it very heavily. So Clearly. That's the only reason I talk about it, not necessarily because I did it. I really think that internationalization is super under valued, and the tooling it needs years of work in order to get good. And the thing I wrote is just a very basic start to the ecosystem of tools that you would need to do that well. How's that?
That's good.
It's clearly you got some opinions, which is great. I mean, that's the whole point of this show, is just to kind of bring some different perspectives towards, this JavaScript web platform landscape and discuss the various things that are going on, both current events to a degree, then also some tried and true arguments that haven't been fleshed out enough or could use different perspectives. And so clearly you're bringing some opinions here, but I'm curious why this show for you. Like what exactly about the prospect of the show gets you excited?
I guess you picked up on the fact that I have opinions, and when someone offers you a platform for advocating for those opinions, it can be tempting. I mean, I'm very excited to do it. I think that Michael and Rachel also have very unique perspectives. I'm not necessarily excited for the listeners, right? Like, I think they can make up their own minds. I'm not saying that like they're going to be imbued with my opinions and then become better people or anything like that. But if listeners happen to find things valuable, then I think my excitement will turn from potential excitement to real excitement, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're skeptical then.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. That's okay. I think the default thing. But I'm not doubtful, but I just there wouldn't be a great reason to do it if I was just making people angry or annoying them or something like that. So I'm very excited at the potential for having discussions with people that are valuable. And I hope they're valuable.
Absolutely agree. And that's our hope, is to have a shared discussion amongst all the people in the greater JavaScript / front end / web community, and a place where it's like the water cooler. That's why we want to do a live show. We want to have interaction with the chat room, because there's more people adding to the show than just the 3 panelists, or in some cases maybe 4 panelists who happen to have microphones that day. But one of the reasons why I'm so excited, Alex, to have you on is because Michael has convinced me that you are excellent at arguing with him. And I love a good debate, and I love and I think we all do. And so I think we'll have not just a shared discussion, but hopefully, some entertaining discourse as well. As I hear, you're pretty good at taking the other side of the argument, or regardless of what it is that Michael has to say that day. Is that the case?
I'm sure that's how Michael would portray it. Yeah, it's been a pastime of mine to, I would say, keep Michael honest. I'm sure he would say always take the other side no matter what. But Michael, it actually has cleaned up his act quite a bit. But if you go back three or so years on his Twitter, he was always just saying the most asinine stuff. Just to I don't even know.
Just the fluff, the feathers, something like that.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so
Ruffle the feathers.
I always, as someone who knew Michael and knew that he would know that it was coming from a place of love, I took it upon myself to try to call out anything I thought was potentially, let's say, unfair. So Michael and I go back a long time of comfortable but heated discourse. So yeah, now that you say that is also a very exciting aspect of this. In the past year or so, we've tended to agree on a lot of stuff. So maybe it hasn't been on the forefront of my mind, but I'm sure if you bring up some topics, we'll have some different opinions. Yeah.
So if you had
he's softening in his age, I think.
If you had to characterize your perspective, just with regard to front end and the browser, progressive enhancement, graceful degradation, are you a single page app? Do you believe in frameworks? Do you not believe in frameworks? Just give us a taste of, where Alex stands in the some of the hot topics in the front end, at least.
I'm definitely a pragmatist when it comes to most things. I have strong opinions about how things should be done, and they don't necessarily line up with how I do things. And I think that's good to an extent, right? Like, I would love to make everything 100% accessible and super fast, and sometimes you give up those things. I think it's very important to know what you're giving up to make those conscious decisions rather than make them not caring decisions or whatever. But I feel very strongly that accessibility is extremely important, and fight for it at Stripe. And I feel very strongly that performance is something that is very easy to say, oh, well, we're not performant right now and people love our thing, and they don't realize how much better it could be. And so it's very easy to ignore those types of things because it's oh, well, no one complains that they can't use our app because it's not keyboard accessible or whatever. And that's because they can't use our app, so they just went and used something else. Or it's oh, we same with mobile support. It's well, we don't get any hits from mobile. It's well, that's because no one can use the website on their phone.
Kind of self-fulfilling prophecy
exactly.
kind of thing.
So no one wants to. It's a bad experience.
I both am aware of those types of gotchas, but I also understand that getting something out there and shipping something and just having a product at all that some people can use, it can often be a good start to something that you can eventually have all those other things on. So it doesn't necessarily, even though I feel very strongly about those things, I won't necessarily be mad at someone for not doing them much. The only reason I kind of bring that up is if someone ships anything that doesn't have any or every single feature or every single important topic imbued into its core and implemented perfectly, then someone is outraged. And outrage is fine or whatever, but it's just, I understand the trade-offs. So I guess that's a preface to all my opinions, is that I feel strongly that these things are right, but I understand the need to sometimes skip them temporarily, or something might die before we ever get to it. But so I come from a big performance background. That's what I worked on a bunch at Bizarre Voice and at Stripe early on. A lot of the performance I worked on at Stripe has been in build processes and things like that, though. So not necessarily the same thing. I wrote an article a while back and ran a conference called front end ops. It's on Smashing Mag. There are now like resume or like job postings on like Stack Overflow for a front end operations engineer, which is kind of cool. I mean, not that I took two words that already existed and just said them next to each other, but it kind of links to the articles and stuff. Yeah, mashup. There you go. And so a lot of the work I do is actually in the front end operations world. It's less like writing the end like UIs these days, and a lot of it's the infrastructure parts or the build tooling or the measurement or internationalization, things like that. So a lot of my or measuring performance is another part of front end operations. I guess single page apps. There's a big war if you can even call something a single page app, or something's document versus app based. Sure. And I don't really care what you call it. I think server rendering is a good solution for lots of pages that people talk about. Anything that you're going to read or you'd want to be SEO'd. But for things like as soon as you add a login and put something behind a login, the need for server render, like, do I need to server render my SVG graphs or like the lists of customers in the Stripe dashboard or something like that? Like no one hits that page from like no one hits the customers list page from the server. It's always navigated. I don't know. I think there are so many trade-offs that it's silly to say like if you're not server rendering, you're doing something wrong. Like measure the actual experience rather than the technology behind it. And as long as the experience is good, then I really don't care what the implementation is. Single page apps and progressive enhancement. I'm a pretty big proponent of progressive enhancement. I think more so than some of my colleagues at Stripe. Stripe does really awesome like landing pages and things for new products that we do, and those are like designer led things, and I think they're cutting edge, and so it would be silly to kind of progressively enhance some of them. But I feel pretty strongly that things should work for everybody, even on crappy connections, and I try to advocate for that. But I also understand I also understand the trade-offs. I guess it's the same thing.
You're a pragmatist, you said before, right?
Yeah. So I guess I agree with everyone who are the purists, but my actions don't always fall in line with those things based on other constraints. So I believe very strongly in the idea of the web, in links, in openness and open source, in all that stuff. And I try whenever possible to embody all those things. But I think worrying too much about how pure you are in those regards, as long as you don't, slowly drift off into terribleness, slippery slopes and such.
Right.
But I feel like we like to talk in lots of blacks and whites, and
we live in a world that's gray.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but
I'm sure we'll hear more from you over the next several episodes and see how true this is for you.
Plus, the nice thing about conversations is you can always represent the purist in a conversation because the real world constraints aren't necessarily in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that'll be fun. But it kind of leads us into our next question for you. When you mentioned you believe in the openness and links and like the web fundamentals, what's your favorite thing about JS or about the web platform?
The accessibility of everything, I think, is kind of the, not necessarily in the like handy capable sense or whatever, just the fact that there's no app store, it's federated, it's fully open, the specs are open, people can kind of break away from those things, like pragmatism wise, like browsers can kind of do their own thing a little bit and see if other people will want to go along that path rather than do some pure like, all right, let's sit down with the specs organization for the next 3 years and try to figure out how we want to do X, Y, or Z. Like I like how the web moves forward. It's slower than the proprietary platforms, but I think it's outlasted every single one of them by triple at this point. And you even see with the iOS App Store and stuff like that, the 10 most popular apps of 2016 were made by 3 companies or something like that. So the world where young, or you don't have to be young, don't be ageist, where new and inexperienced people can have a good idea and break through. Like the web is still just leaps and bounds above every other ecosystem. And the fact that everything is open and all the tooling can be open is just, it's such a welcoming, wide space where there's room for everybody. And I really appreciate that. And I think that's one of the reasons why even though it moves more slowly than other platforms, and I think those platforms are necessary to the growth of the web. Like when the web was winning 100%, it didn't grow at all. Like the languages didn't get any better. The features didn't get any better. I mean, partially Microsoft's fault, but when other things started competing with it, like that's when people were like, oh, we need to get like external device things into the navigator object so we can do the same things as apps. And that's a driving force. But I think the ecosystem of the web is more open and welcoming and harder to use and more frustrating. But ultimately, like the best real output of kind of what we can do, like it's the pragmatists platform, I guess, in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get probably both mine and Adam's amen on that. I think the lack of having to ask someone's permission in order to do a thing, and the platform that allows you to just set up shop and start a business without having to have some sort of gatekeepers permission is a powerful thing. On the flip side of that, you kind of alluded to it a little bit. You said it's frustrating, but what's your least favorite thing then?
Least favorite thing, Safari. Like people who don't do it right. I guess
browser.
I Safari.
Like, cool.
Sorry.
I think it's actually pronounced Safari. The people who take from the web but don't give back to the web, or things like Safari. It's not Safari itself. Safari's pretty good because Apple's so currently good at what they do that it ends up not mattering a whole bunch. But anytime the web tries to innovate and Safari doesn't agree, then they can almost always automatically stifle that innovation. And that is really upsetting to me. Things like service workers that like the whole web is behind and just no one knows whether Safari intends on doing it or not, or whether they think it'll cannibalize their other marketplaces. That's just really frustrating to me because they very much profit from the web, and they don't necessarily give back in the ways that I'd want them to. They always give back in the ways that help their other platforms, which can be sometimes extremely useful, but also not friendly to openness.
This is a little meta, but are you a listener of Request for Commits?
Not currently.
Not currently. So there's one episode, since you're on that subject, you've got to listen to. Like it has to be something you do this afternoon.
Sure.
It's the one called Funding the Web with Brendan Eich.
Okay.
And you will never get more of a historical background to funding the web than you will ever get from that roughly a little over an hour. I think it's 74 minutes long based on the timestamp here. That's the good one there.
Brendan is an old JSConf speaker and a TXJS speaker, and we've done the speaker circuit together. So I may have heard a lot of that information firsthand before. But I'll definitely go listen too.
Well, listen to it, and then you can tell us how much of it you already
How
knew.
accurate is it? Yeah. How in the know are you, Alex?
Yeah,
Right.
I'd be interested.
On that note, then, when we look at the future of this show, we asked you a couple questions like, where do you stand on certain controversial issues? What are your favorite and least favorite things about the web, JavaScript, things like that? But I'm kind of curious on what particular topics you may be excited to talk about in the near future.
Current stuff. Yeah. I think well, service workers have been around for a while, but that kind of world of the web is very interesting. I also do like a lot of work on a large application at a company where people use something a lot. So frameworks are something that I think that Rachel and Michael are a little less interested in, and that I have some experience about. And there tends to be a revolution every 2 or 3 years, so we're kind of due. Fiber could be it in React or whatever. And I'm also a pragmatist when it comes to choosing libraries. There's a lot of hype around React, and React is amazing and great. I think I introed Tomachino and Pete Hunt at JSConf before they announced it, whenever it got like a terrible reception from everybody. So I feel partially responsible. But like there are trade-offs to like React is super hyped, but like if you want something that already has a fully baked ecosystem and build tooling and all that kind of stuff, like you can't beat Ember for that. You have other trade-offs like file size and things. And then also like people reach for React and like they need the modification of the on change event that React does, and that's the only thing they're using in the entire library. And so kind of back to a world where maybe people are reaching for libraries that are too big. So I'm interested into where this goes. There's currently like Preact and a few other ones that are like tiny versions of it, and there are versions of things where people want some of this to be baked, DOM diffing to be baked into a browser specification, like all that kind of stuff. So I'm very interested to see where the frameworks world goes, even if I'm not necessarily writing any frameworks currently. What else? I don't know. Build tooling is also something I care a lot about, that I think we're due for another revolution on. So I don't know how much people care about that, but things like Webpack and those systems. I was a contributor to Require.js back in the day with James Burke. James Burke did 99.999% of it. I added a little bit to the spec on behalf of the jQuery team, but that's since been mostly dead. And now Node is working on implementing ES6 modules in an asynchronous way, which is kind of full circle, which is fine. Those two things, I guess, are pretty boring, frameworks and build tools. But that's probably why Michael had chose me for those opinions, because it weren't necessarily represented between him with Node stuff and Rachel with robotics and stuff.
Right. Well, you would be surprised, because if we went back and look at our stats on the changelog over the last couple of years, 2 of our biggest shows have been 1, React, and 2, most recently, was Webpack 2. So people love hearing about those topics, even though if you may have to convince Michael and Rachel to talk about them. But.
Yeah. There's enough drama to where they'll come up naturally, I think. The third thing I'd say that maybe isn't represented, but also is underrepresented in total, is kind of web security, which I do a lot of help with at Stripe. And I spoke a bunch the past 2 years on content security policy and kind of trying to help people write secure applications. I think a lot of the frameworks are moving in directions that help people do that a lot, but it's still a very sad and dangerous world out there. And I'd like to advocate for those technologies as well.
Can't wait. So I guess to wrap up, let's figure out maybe your perspective on who you think might listen to the show. So each host kind of brings their own perspective, their own, as we've already talked about in this kind of preliminary show, but kind of curious who you think should listen to this show. So anybody out there, you can even name a name if you know particularly somebody who's like, this would be a great listener, or a style of a listener. Who do you think should listen to this show?
Sure. I mean, they have to be able to put up with a lot. You have to be patient and not dislike Michael too much. So
we're down, audience.
Yeah, we're down to like maybe 10 to 15 people or so. You could also hate listen though. And I think that audience could be quite large. I think if you're someone who, like, if you're the class of person who has a Twitter account but can't keep up with every possible piece of drama or doesn't care to, wants it distilled down. If you're someone who likes like the newsletters that come once a week that says, here's what happened in CSS this week, I think if you also drive to work, then this could be a good compromise. And also possibly, like if you're only interested in currently a single section, you're coming in from Node or robotics, it could also be good to kind of reach out your mind into the other sections and find the cross sections between you and the other kind of portions of the community. So I think anyone's a potentially good listener. I don't think we're precluding too many people. I hope we're not. But also, you've heard me talk for the last hour, so you have to be a certain type of person to be able to fully enjoy my mumbles.
I think you're great. I think we've teased on the call with Michael, which listeners will be able to go back and listen to. But we teased about putting out the pilot episode you all recorded, which I thought was really great. Actually, I mean, I was excited about the show, but once I heard that pilot between the three of y'all and how well you had chemistry already in terms of just like being able to argue with Michael or share an opinion or share how you weren't very clued into a certain area or whatever. Just the honesty and the conversation came from was really, really cool for me. So I'm excited to put that out there for everybody. But I was personally excited based on that pilot. So we'll see if we can put it out for sure because we've teased it enough that we have to kind of do it now.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know the plan was to not put that out. So there you go.
Oh, news to you.
News to you. Right, we'll have
surprise. We might ship it.
we might ship it.
Oh no, the opposite is what I said. I didn't know the plan wasn't to. I thought that was going to go out, so you should ship it.
Right. So I was saying, it's a surprise that we might actually do what you already thought that we were going to do in the first place.
Gotcha. Well, Alex, I mean, I'm excited, man. Thank you so much for this time today to kind of kick off things for you and just share your portion of the story as you bring to this show. And thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
All right, that was Alex Sexton giving us his backstory behind the scenes of who he is, what he cares about, and what he hopes to bring to the show. And as you can tell, he's quite opinionated and also quite funny. So tune in live every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Once again, changelog.com/JSParty. Subscribe. Don't miss a show. Also head to changelog.com/community. Sign up, get access to Slack, and make sure you're in the JS Party channel every Friday when we do the show live. And thanks for listening.